Reacting to Google's recently launched Wi-Fi hubs in Lagos, Ade Atobatele, technology entrepreneur, says government needs to support local companies also working to build the internet connectivity ecosystem in Lagos. Take a look.
Wonderful thing. I think Zuckerberg tried to do the same thing about 2 years ago when he came to Nigeria. I just have one slight concern. It's a particular concern because about 5 days before the announcement, a young man came to me and was complaining bitterly about the government. He already has 48 Wi-Fi hotspots around the country. He has an agreement with Don Jazzy, the popular musician that we all know about, and they were putting down. And apparently he'd gone to FAN and had tried to do this, and FAN was very enthusiastic about him putting hotspots down in their area of authority. And then about 2 days before the Google thing, he gets a letter saying that they're no longer going to do business with him. There's nothing wrong in doing business with Google. Google isn't a charity. It's trying to get to the last mile, sort of. Africa does have a large population, and hopefully their disposable income will come up and they will make money for Google somewhere down the line, and somebody's got to reach them, so it's a good thing. But what is not a good thing is going with foreign companies at the expense of local companies that have shown competence. South Asian countries like China did not get to where they are by inviting Americans and British people in to take over their local industry.
But surely there is enough, the market is big enough for more than one player.
Surely there is. That's not the point. The point is this gentleman was already negotiating with FAN. It would have been polite of FAN to say, do you have the capacity that other people have or whatever, rather than to just shut the door on him. As I said, I didn't even know that Google were putting their stations out. And Google is a good company. It's the fault here is not Google's, because I'm sure Google would never want to crush local competition. There is no competition, really. I mean, they're helping us. But the government also has to understand that the government needs to help its citizens.
So what are your thoughts on the fact that Google is partnering with local network providers?
There is nowhere that Google would want to go that put its stations down that it would need to crush a local competitor. We are a very large country. I'm not saying that Google shouldn't put its stations down. As I said, Google is a very good company. It's been very good to Nigeria. But the government does not need to kill deals that come from local people when there is capacity elsewhere. It would have been one thing if the government from the presidency, because FAN comes under the aviation and aviation comes under the presidency, says, oh, why don't you split it, or why don't you do yours here and that? But what they actually did was just shut them out.
Let's move on. Let's talk about the government's broadband strategy. There's a strategy to increase broadband penetration in the country. So I'm thinking, does this complement efforts like what Google is doing?
The broadband strategy was chaired by Ernest Ndukwe when the previous minister, Comtech minister, was there. It was a short-sighted broadband, and even when it was put down, it was never going to draw the capacity that it did. And as soon as the government came in, they sort of put it to one side and moved on.
So if Google is able to, because the target is 200 locations by the end of 200 locations by the end of 2019, what are your thoughts in terms of how this could change? Because they're also trying to change user experience. What are your thoughts in terms of how this changes our broadband situation and our use of the internet?
As I said, Zuckerberg came. He had exactly the same thing. Free hotspots, being able to get them at very cheap prices. Airtel has Airtel and 9Mobile allow you to get onto the internet free with going to certain websites, and a number of Nigerian startups have utilized that. Any capacity that we can get is good. any capacity. As I said, the young man that I was talking about before, he already has 48 stations on the ground, and they are used by a large number of people. If another person turns up with another 500 or another 50, they all complement. This is something that the government should be encouraging, and I'm all for the government encouraging it. I'm just saying that when they do it, the left hand should know what the right hand is doing and not crush local entrepreneurs while thinking that they're doing a wonderful thing, because it doesn't go anywhere. It kills the spirit.
Okay, now, by the year 2050, it's projected that Nigeria is projected to be the third most populous nation by the year 2050. So obviously, we have to move fast with our broadband penetration. And since studies have shown that countries with higher broadband penetration are able to increase their economic growth, also GDP growth, are you confident that we are able to, with the policy that we have on ground, and hoping that there is continuity in that policy and we do not have policy somersault, and with the likes of Google and hopefully other companies, especially local, coming on stream to provide free Wi-Fi and deepen the broadband in the country, we would be able to, by the time we reach 2050, we'll be using technology to make positive impact in critical sectors like health and education?
The Wi-Fi hotspots that can be put down by Google or Flowbyte, which was the company that this other gentleman had, are complementary to a national policy. A national policy, what Mabola Johnson had was the federal government had rights of way. The federal government has not been able to utilize its rights of way on highways to get cheap fiber down those highways so that you can have spurs to local areas. That is what is going to increase broadband nationally. Otherwise, we're not going to sell out to Google. We're not going to sell out to Flowbyte. We're not going to be a one or two company broadband. We need to be have a holistic broadband policy. And as I said, Mabola Johnson started something, but it wasn't comprehensive enough for the government to be able to take it up.
So what's missing in this current broadband plan that we have?
Mabola Johnson, as I said, had a policy whereby the government took advantage of things like the Lagos to Ibadan road and got the fibre down there free of charge, because what tends to happen is taxation and over-taxation once you get into states, and everybody sees it as a money generating thing for IGR, and the telecom companies have to now deal with enormous amounts of red tape, and so they don't go down there. So what they need to do is actually get rid of that. Mabola Johnson did that, but she didn't actually manage to get into the broadband the last mile. The last mile, once you've taken it from the express road, how do you take it to the local town is the way to do that. We put together a plan in those days, way back in those days, as I say, whereby it was like community radio grew up in the US, whereby there would be multiple licenses. Maybe Shagamu would have a license, and then maybe Jabode would have a license. These licenses would be cheap to get, and local people could run them. Over a period of time, they would consolidate into a national thing. And then I think there's a company called Tribune in America, which started like this maybe a couple of decades ago and is now Comcast. That's how Comcast started. It's a well-trodden road. We understand how to get the things out there. We're just not playing the game.
Do you see a future for Nigeria where we're able to get our policy right, get the policy document, and especially implementation right, and a future where we're also deploying things like machine learning and artificial intelligence?
Oshomole tells you that he's going to sack Ngige. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. When we have a policy that comes from the top and is executed by everybody, when you wake up in the morning and you understand what the national policy is, when I wake up in the morning and we ask ourselves, how do we contribute to it, then we'll move forward. But what we're doing right now is silos. We have a lot of good intentions, but they don't hang together. So one ministry is doing one thing and another ministry is doing another thing, and they are all looking for personal glory, so to speak, and it is not holistic. The nation needs to understand where we're going. The one thing that we've learned from Trump is that you can galvanize a nation in one direction. I'm not galvanized. I don't know anybody else in Nigeria that's galvanized in one direction. Once we get to that particular point, and it's not that difficult as we've seen, then we'll have policies that affect everybody, and everybody will understand how to build in their capacity to that. What we have right now is the left hand not knowing what the right, and sometimes the left hand fighting the right hand.
That was Ade Atobatele, technology entrepreneur.